I'm Devin Schadt. I'm a father and a husband. I've been married to my wife for 23 years now, and I'm a father of 5 daughters, so I'm surrounded by women. Wish it was like this in high school, but yeah, so it's good. Well, I think a great analogy is Bourne Identity. Remember Jason Bourne? He's found unconscious, lying in the Mediterranean Sea. He's got a couple gunshot wounds in his back, and Italian fishermen find him. And when he wakes up, he doesn't know who he is. He's lost track with his identity, who he really is, because he's suffering from temporary memory loss. And then he undergoes a series of assassination attempts. He doesn't know who's hunting him, why he's being hunted, because he's lost touch with who he is. And I think that's like each and every one of us. Our biggest battle is to discover who we really are. Like St. Catherine of Siena says, become who you really are, and you'll set the world ablaze, right? So our biggest mission in life is to discover who God has really created me to be. And why is that? The devil does not want you to become who you're really called to be, because you are called to be an expression, a manifestation of God's glory. God created you in a way that no one else is like you. So imagine God is this like super huge sphere, and on the edge of that sphere are all these dots. Each dot is you, and he expresses himself uniquely and particularly through each and every person. And so who you are is so much different than anyone else. But have you ever noticed, like, we buy things with logos on them? We buy these things with brand marks on them, right? Why is that? Because we think by doing that, that's gonna give me value. That's gonna make me unique, right? But you end up being like everybody else. I buy the Mercedes car so I can be like everybody else who has a Mercedes. Makes me cool, I'm part of the club, right? That's stupid. Because really our identification is not in logos, but it's in the Logos, God, right? It's not in brand marks, but the one who's been marked with our sins, right? And so the key here is this, is my battle and your biggest battle is to really work with God to discover who we really are, okay? So your identity leads to your destiny. Who you are determines who you become. And so many of us, we're finding our identity in what the world tells us. And we end up becoming like everyone else, and then we wonder why we're sad, why we're depressed, why our life is empty and meaningless. And it's because we're just like everybody else, and we're denying the very God-given identity, the person he's made us to be. So you look at Jesus. Jesus's biggest battle was to maintain and proclaim his identity. You look at it in Luke chapter 4, was it? When he's led into the desert, is that right? Luke chapter 4? But anyway, the point is this, is that the devil asks him, if you are the Son of God, turn this stone into bread. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from the parapet of the temple, right? If you are the Son of God, do this. If you are the Son of God, do that. And what is the devil doing? The devil is blasting away at Jesus' identity, saying, prove yourself. Are you who you say you are? And this narrative continues throughout the Passion. Jesus in the garden, he's asked by the soldiers, by those who want to capture him, which one of you is Jesus the Nazarene? And now imagine this. Imagine if you're Jesus in this moment. We have to really place ourselves in this to understand the totality of what it means to admit who we really are. Jesus knows that by admitting that he is Jesus of Nazarene, he's going to be captured. He's going to be tormented. He's going to be flogged. He's going to be crushed. And yet, in that moment, he has this decision to either be who he really is and proclaim that, or to flee from his identity. And so what does Jesus do? He steps forward and says, I am. He attests to his human identity. Then before Caiaphas, the high priest says, are you the Son of the living God? Which means, are you divine? And Jesus knows that by answering yes is going to mean his ultimate death. They're going to crucify him. And he says, I am. He attests to his divine nature. So he attests to his human nature in the garden. He attests to his divine nature there before Caiaphas. And then before Pilate. Pilate says, are you a king? And he says, it's you who say that I am. My kingdom isn't of this world, so you are a king. Yes, I am. So he attests to his divinity, his kingship, that he is sovereign, that he's Lord, right? Now, what does this mean? It's going to cost him his life. And I guarantee you, think about the experiences you have in your life where you've been afraid to stick up for a friend. You've been afraid to admit to your religious belief. You've been afraid to be who you really are. It's because you're really afraid that people are going to marginalize you, that they're going to crush you, that they're going to reject you. Okay? Now, become who you really are and you'll set the world ablaze. Jesus had to become, or he was, who he really was, but he had to manifest that. He had to express that. He had to become that full expression of God's glory. And that's what you and I were called to do. We're called to be that expression, that manifestation of God's glory, but it demands us to be courageous. It demands us to be faithful. Now, here's a situation. You don't know who you really are. You don't. You might think you know who you are, but you don't yet. It's like a mystery. The key to us discovering who we really are so that we can set this world ablaze, so that our identity can lead to our destiny, is meeting with God throughout the day. 3 times a day, enter the silence with God and listen. Talk to him about your dreams, your desires. And by the way, this is super cool. A lot of people, spiritual people who are, they encounter Christ, they become Christian, and they think that walking with Christ is suppressing your desires. No. Walking with Christ is untwisting your disordered desires to find the authentically God-given, divinely planted desire. The desire that he's planted in you, because that desire leads to your glory. He's designed you. He's hardwired you with certain desires that will lead you to him, that will lead you to more. But that's what happens in prayer. You take those desires to God and you ask him to untwist the disordered desires to get to the authentic desire. You say, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? And day after day of meeting with him and listening to him and talking with him and then giving yourself away to others in charity, you'll become the person that God has created and destined you to be, and you'll have a life of glory.